Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and it is, I don't even know what day it is, September 15th, YC127, and this is the Eve Universe Show! Uh-oh, I peaked my volume. Shit. All right, well, nothing's going right today. As you can tell, I don't have a webcam. I don't have anything. It's been a chaotic week up until this point. I should have streamed yesterday. Last week, but just crisis after crisis and all sorts of things happened. I do apologize, but we do need to jump into stuff today because there's important stuff going on. There's important stuff that happened last week that we do need to cover, and there's more happening tomorrow. So we are going to be discussing all of that today and getting everybody caught up and kind of ready to go as we get through this September. Been out of work for 5 weeks due to back injury. First day back in Ash's streaming. Yay! That's right, Ragtag. I haven't been streaming because you haven't been around. That's why. That's all it is. No. All right. So we have a Legion Major update that came out last week. We have the shooter Vanguard has its stuff starts tomorrow. So we got to be ready for that. But we also have a monthly economic report and the CSM 20 stuff to go over. So we're going to try to cover all of that today. I am the shooter. Which one? The Vanguard. See, we've got Operation Nemesis FAQ. We've got the monthly economic report. We've got stuff about CSM 20, and we've got the Legion Major update. So the Legion Major update is out. Oh yeah, by the way, before I jump into anything else, we're probably going to talk about this a few times today, but let's go ahead and cover this because today is your last day if you're watching this live. Or of the day that I record this. This is really important if you haven't done this already. As usual, on Mondays, it's good to remind everybody to go into your New Eden store and pick up your skill points if you haven't yet, because it resets on Tuesday. However, this particular one is even more important than normal. You get this skill points and free resculpting certificate. The resculpting certificate is not tradable, so you can't sell this on the market, and it doesn't disrupt the market for these items in general, other than reducing the demand or whatever. But it's probably very worthwhile to at least pick it up just in case you want it later. My bet is that this will not be available next week, that this is only available this week, which today, if you're watching this live, is the last day of this week. So go ahead and redeem that and put it into your redemption queue. Once it is there, if we close this, if we go into our redemption queue, we can see it does not have a timer on it. So you can just leave this in your redemption queue forever, basically, until you want to do a resculpt at some point. But you do need to claim that today, very likely at the latest. I would doubt if they're going to keep this going for multiple weeks. So there you go. That's the number one thing that we want to make sure that we talk to people about. Hold on, let me get my pseudo camera back up and running correctly. All right. So that is that. Let's go ahead and jump into the Legion Major update. Okay, so I ain't gonna lie. The Legion Major update was, I guess, a little bit disappointing to me. There's a lot to think about. I actually went back and tried to piece together because I feel like I'm being either gaslit or I'm having a, Mandela effect kind of moment here. But I distinctly remember lots of things being said as being part of the Legion Major update. And when I go back, I can't find anything too zeroed in on that. Things like, but there were things that were mentioned, things like Gold Rush and salvaging. And I think I know a little bit about what happened, but the honest to God truth is that our Legion Major update is mostly a balancing pass, but we're going to jump into that and look at it. It is true that a lot of things that were supposed to come into Legion has come at like other times, right? Like the Fire and Smoke stuff is now in the game. Some other stuff is in the game already, so they didn't necessarily wait for stuff for the major update, but then there's also some pretty significant things that we were expecting in Legion by the Legion Major update that are not here. Gold Rush, They did say that the map updates, like the Dotland style map, is likely after Legion, but there was some suggestions that there would at least be some improvements to the map coming before then. We haven't really seen much involving that. We have seen some work on the API and stuff, but either way, let's go ahead and jump into what happened last Tuesday on the 9th. Capsuleers, a new chapter in the Legion expansion unfolds today with the arrival of a major update. I think that Fire and Smoke used to be in the game back in like 2009. That's true, but not quite as like to the extent as it is now, for sure. So one thing that's worth thinking about is the fact that like the Revenant major update. Yes, we do. We'll talk about that too, Wizard. The Revenant major update was a significant update, not just in what it did, but as being a kind of turning point for the EVE community, right? So with the Revenant major update, in fact, actually, let me pull that up real quick. Hold on. Revenant major update. So the idea of the major updates really started with the Revenant major update. So, you know, we've talked about this before. CCP has for a long time gone with like 2 expansions a year. And then especially during scarcity, well, just prior to scarcity, for the few years before scarcity, they'd kind of gotten rid of expansions in general and just moved to like a 10-week patch cycle. And then with scarcity and in that era, like 2020 era, they switched to quadrants, right? Which were 4 major updates a year. And then, of course, just past scarcity, they restarted the expansions with Uprising. I think that was 2022. And in the same way, like Uprising was a big world, as far as updates go, it was an incredibly successful update. As far as like a return to updates go for CCP, it was a very effective one. But again, a big reason why was because it was a fairly easy win for them, right? Faction warfare is something that was very beloved by a lot of people. It is incredibly effective at creating small gang PvP and PvP that allows people to have rewards and allow newer players to engage in PvP kind of engagements and get people more hooked into the universe in general. It's good for all those things. And yet it was kind of left on the wayside for a long time and had kind of rotten. And so it was pretty easy, not like easy is probably the wrong word, but it was smart for CCP to go after that as kind of low-hanging fruit for something that they could win, to get a good win for the Uprising expansion. And you can tell, like, a year later with the Havoc expansion, they try to kind of follow up on that, and that one didn't do nearly as well, right? Like, the insurgencies, while they can be pretty fun, they are definitely not as successful as Faction Warfare, the base game in general. Havoc was not nearly as successful of an expansion as Uprising was. And so in the same sort of way, like, they were able to come out the gate and be very strong, and then as they try to follow up with these things, it's a little bit more of a struggle. The Revenant major update was their first idea of the major update, right? Where like you have the expansion, but then you have this other significant update midway through the expansion. And Revenant was really weird because the Revenant expansion, like the lore and everything about the expansion, was focused completely around the Drifters. But at the time, the actual expansion itself was completely about like the Deathless putting up mercenary dens and the new ships, the Tholos and the Cenotaph and all that kind of stuff. And there wasn't a peep about Drifters. But after... well, yes, TL, that is correct. But after Revenant started, over time, like Revenant kind of came into itself, right? So the Revenant major update was a big deal because it was the first time that CCP Okami came in and really stepped in as his new role. And not only did it make some pretty significant changes, those changes explicitly addressed a lot of the bigger problems that were happening at the time post-Equinox when it came to nullsec trying to get, be happy with the changes that were happening, specifically when it came to mining. So, you know, Okami pointed out that there was going to be some significant changes with this, and there was significant changes with this. But as you can see, all of these are very much like just mostly just balance changes, right? Like changes in the way things operate, not new features or new UI or anything like that necessarily. But because of the fact that this idea of like mining in nullsec and nullsec occupation and sovereignty and all that stuff was considered such a big pain point at the time, the fact that CCP Okami stepped in and did such a major overhaul that directly addressed the people's problems gave weight to the Revenant Major Update. And then in FanFest, they really like drove this point home where it's like, okay, well, now we're going to go back to kind of a little bit like Quadrants, where we have the major updates, or, you know, we have the actual expansions, right? And then halfway through the expansion, we're going to have a major update, right? And so they talk about that during the keynotes and everything when they're announcing the Legion expansion and all that stuff. And at the same time, they're kind of talking about Legion, but every time they talk about Legion, they talk about things that are coming later on in Legion, not with the release of Legion, right? Legion was very much setting the tone of something. And it was very weird because even the Legion trailer, most of the Legion trailer showed stuff that was just not even in the game, right? Or not even in the expansion, rather. Like the first 15 seconds or so of the trailer is all showing off like salvaging and stuff. They even mentioned salvaging in their like preview of like Gold Rush and stuff like that in some of the keynotes and stuff, but then quickly move away from that and don't really talk about it anymore. And so all of this led to a lot of pressure, a lot of hope, a lot of ideas about what's coming to be put on the Legion Major Update. And I'll be frank, the Legion Major Update did not hit that same note as the Revenant Major Update when it comes to like answering the questions that people had, because the questions that people had were much different this time. Instead of being like, hey, when are you going to fix nullsec, it was more like, hey, when are we going to get the rest of this expansion? So the Legion Major Update, much like the Revenant Major Update, is mostly a balance pass. But we're going to look into the details of this, and we're going to look into what has and hasn't come in the Legion expansion, and what we are and are not still waiting on. So first of all, Capsuleers. A new chapter in the Legion expansion unfolds today with the arrival of the Major Update. Shaped by incredible feedback and ideas received from Capsuleers and the Council of Stellar Management, as well as observations from Capsuleer activities across New Eden, this update revitalizes combat, expands exploration, and introduces new ways to shape your destiny. As CCP Okami, Eve Game Design Director, explains, these changes are about more than balance. They're about breathing new life to the battlefield. This update creates room for Capsuleers to experiment, adapt, and explore. That is where Eve is at its best. The next expansion should be Legion 2, so we can get the rest of the expansion. There is, like, in the earliest day, there was, like, in the very, very beginning, there was 2 expansions in a row where it was 1 and 2. I can't remember what it was called, which expansion it was. Was it Red Moon Rising? I can't. One of the earliest expansions has a 1 and a 2. Obviously, Invasions has a chapter 1, 2, and 3, but yeah, I don't know. Was it Revelations? Maybe. No, I don't. Yeah, maybe. Either way, Legion 2 Electric Boogaloo. Now we get the rest of the Legion. I don't know. I think that the next expansion would be cool. Oh, okay, good. I think that having a Legion or having an expansion that's completely based around exploration, or, you know, whatever, that is focused on the map, Gold Rush, etc., would be a better idea than just Legion 2, you know. But we'll see. Either way, combat has shifted. Marauders, once unmatched in their ability to dominate smaller hulls, now face new restrictions. Their agility has been pulled back, making them kings of damage and tanking still, but no longer the unassailable rulers of the ESS. In their place, Tech 3 destroyers have now gained access to these lucrative sites, breaking Marauders' monopoly and creating a new arena for flexible, fast-moving fleets. ESS cloaking tactics have also been reworked, forcing defenders to reveal themselves sooner and giving raiders a fighting chance. Exodus and Exodus Cold War. Okay, so here's the first thing that's kind of annoying me. Now, obviously, like, full disclosure, I'm a big Marauder enjoyer, not just in PvP, but mostly in PvE. And so, like, when Marauders got buffed back in like 2020 or whatever. That was awesome. And they've been kind of nerfed ever since then. But CCP has sort of tried to nerf Marauders constantly by without taking away like their actual power, right? So rather than reduce their damage or their tank or something, they've focused mostly on their survivability, or not survivability, but like their vulnerabilities, right? They used to be electronic warfare resistant. Now they're not. They're easily neuted or tracking disrupted. You know, it's easy to dismantle them compared to before, but they continue to be very dominant ships, and it kind of makes sense that they would be dominant ships. They are literally the top tier possible ship in subcapital warfare, right? The Tech 2 battleship that's built around war and conflict. So they keep being kind of chewed at. Most recently, if I remember correctly, the Paladin had some of its range brought down and whatnot. But this is probably one of the more aggressive changes that they have made to the Marauder. And what I find really weird about this patch in particular is that it feels like their changes when it comes to the Marauder really reflects their not realizing, like the left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing. And it's around this idea about the ESS, right? So the problem is that, well, does it go into here? It talks about it in the patch notes in particular, but this idea that like, so hey, what's up, Sargon? Their agility has been pulled back, making them the kings of damage and tanking still, but no longer the unassailable rulers of the ESS. This is a very weird statement, because one of the things that, and they even say in their place, Tech 3 destroyers will now gain access to these lucrative sites, but they didn't make the Marauder less good at the ESS by reducing their agility. They made the Marauder less good at the ESS by removing them from the ESS. Hold on, let's see if we can. I didn't pull up the actual patch notes. The patch notes themselves also kind of reflect this in a very, very weird way, in my opinion. Would be cool if they used the name of the T3 cruisers as the expansion names. So the next one will be Proteus. Okay, so is this? Wait. Yeah. Okay. So if we look at this, it says cutting down. Wait, where is it? Where is it? Hold on. Wait. Didn't they remove... Wait. Now I'm having like a crazy moment. Didn't Marauders get removed from the ESS completely? They did. Okay. And that's what freaks me out about... Yeah. Marauders are now unable to access the main bank room of the ESS. So what gets me about this is that, like, they say Marauders are now unable to access the main bank room of the ESS, but then at the bottom, shoot, where is it? Hold on. I'll just have to look up the word Marauder. So I'm so dumb. Wait, hold on. Never mind. I'm wrong. Wrong piece of information. There's multiple things going on here that makes me think that they didn't really like fully grasp what they were doing. So first of all, or like it wasn't one cohesive idea. So here we say Marauders are not able to join the ESS, but here it says that they're balancing Marauders in the ESS by reducing their agility, which is kind of weird, right? But then also, this is what it was. they removed the micro jump drive beacon, micro jump drive reactivation cooldown roll bonus for all Marauders, which is another very aggressive update to the Marauder. So there's a lot of things all happening to the Marauder at the same time right now. They're removing their micro jump drive reactivation cooldown, which is a big advantage for Marauders. They nerfed the Vargur a little bit, and then also made it so that Marauders can't access the main bank room of the ESS. In fact, wait. Hold on. I'm having a moment of like madness here. Let me check something real quick. The Legion update, from what I heard, didn't have some expectations to certain. It was a. I mean, I was a bit disappointed for sure. This is going to be not dark mode. Sorry. But let's see. Is this 3 days ago? Hold on. No, we don't want that one. We want... let's see. Attributes per type. Do we have any of the Marauders here? Megathron Naval Issue. Paladin. Reactivation bonus went to none. Wait, okay. So, hold on. This doesn't... Wait. So this statement is just literally not true? Hold on. Please, bear with me. I hope this you guys can agree with me that this is a bit confusing, right? Because it says... Combat has shifted. Marauders, once unmatched in their ability to dominate smaller hulls, now face newer restrictions. Their agility has been pulled back, making them kings of damage and taking still, but no longer the unassailable rulers of the ESS. What's weird about this is that their agility, according to HoboLeaks, is not affected at all. If we look up the Paladin, like, yeah, the reactivation bonus is gone, but that's it. And that's the same with all of the Marauders except for the Vargur, who also lost their ship bonus a little bit. Their you know, as they say in the patch notes. So their agility is not affected. The only thing that they could be I understand that, Malak, I'm getting there. So the only thing that they could be talking about is how nimble they are with micro jump drives as being removed. But what's weird about that is that HoboLeaks is perfect. Like, HoboLeaks is the most trusted source, by the way. So what gets me about this is that micro jump drives could not be used in the ESS anyways, because the ESS has a scram effect on the inside of it, which makes it so that micro jump drives are not usable inside of there. So that is definitely not what made Marauders dominant within ESSs. And on top of that, they're also being, like, what's being countering them in the ESS now is them being removed from the ESS, not their agility being pulled back. This statement is just weirdly wrong in, like, every single level, even if you just accept it for what it is. And then if you go back to the patch notes, the other thing that gets me is we go here and we see, okay, well, Marauders. So we also have the micro jump drive reactivation cooldown being removed from all Marauders. But then if we look at, if we look deeper in the patch notes, we can see, the previous, so when we jump to Pochvin, they're talking about the observatory flashpoints, the big dread site inside of Pochvin. It says the previous change to site rewards had an outsized effect on groups running non-Marauder setups. We are adjusting the payout values of the site so it is still valuable for these groups. To compensate for the new reward reversion, a micro jump drive block has been added to the lobby of these sites. This is intended to reduce the usefulness of Marauders within that area. But, like, yes, it does have the Bastion module change. But, like, the idea that Marauder, like micro jump drives, are a defining feature of the Marauder was completely removed in the exact same patch that this update was made, right? So in order to counter overdominance of ESS, we're going to reduce their agility. We're reducing their agility by removing their ability to do micro jump drives as fast as or like faster. So, but like that isn't even what made them dominant in the ESS, but they're also removing them from the ESS. But they're also making this other change, which removes micro jump drives from this other place, so that way Marauders aren't being dominated. But like, Marauders are not going to be defined by their micro jump drive anymore. This patch, and like it feels like there were 3 different people all trying to deal with the Marauder situation, and none of them were talking to each other, right? Because like, if you're going to remove the micro jump drive from Marauders, then that you definitely don't need to put this, like, this block doesn't do it. Like, every battle cruiser and battleship can micro jump drive the exact same as a Marauder now. Yeah, so let's talk about what actually happened. So micro jump drives happened to be introduced into the game at about the same time, a little bit before Marauders got their rework. And so as kind of a bonus to this, like, Marauders got their Bastion module, which causes them to be like locked down for a period of time. When you activate the Bastion module, gives you a combat flag, and it stops you from being able to move as long as, or well, stops you from being able to change your movement as long as you are in Bastion, right? So, you know, you can drift and stuff, but that's about it. And then there was a 70% reduction in the cooldown of micro jump drives for Marauders. So Marauders it was originally designed so that way you could like drop into Bastion, drop out of Bastion, jump, drop back into Bastion, keep firing, which makes sense because Bastion and everything gives your Marauders significantly further, you know, like longer range projection than expected. So this combination of micro jump drive plus long range weapon systems, Marauders have such long range bonuses that often they use short range weapons, but with long ranges, right? So like you can get pulse lasers that go out to 80 kilometers pretty easily. So, any rate, so a lot of people would have a micro jump drive on their Marauder for missions, and they would like basically play pool or like do some trigonometry in order to, you know, basically jump at a 45-degree angle towards the, you know, roughly in the direction of the gate, and then fight from there. And then if like 30 seconds or a minute or whatever it was later, they would just jump down to the gate, and then they would make it to the gate in time, or like they would make it to the gate, and that's how they traveled. Not all Marauders do that. I use a normal prop mod, but that was a very common technique, especially for mission runners. This seems to directly deal with that. There is some issues with Marauders micro jump driving in combat, but I don't think that the micro jump drive is necessarily like the biggest piece of the Marauder, but it was something that was particularly useful, especially for PvE people, because you know you're not going to get scrammed. And now that little piece of it has been completely removed. Okay. Yeah, the game does keep pushing you to play in a group rather than multi-boxing. They are working on that, but I don't think that this change necessarily has any difference in there. I mean, my Paladin in mission running has changed very, very little with this patch. Pretty much doubles your DPS with Bastion off. Your Marauder only gets about faction battleship damage with less tank, which is doable, but in the case, you might as well use a BS. It's actually a little bit more tank because you get Tech 2 resistances. Yeah, I do agree that Marauders shouldn't be able to micro jump drive inside of ESSs, but now they can't even make it go into ESSs, which I'm also kind of fine with. Like, whatever, cool. It just feels like they're doing a lot of different things at the Marauder all at the same time, and some of those changes are redundant. right? If you're going to remove them from ESSs, and if you're going to remove their ability to micro jump drive inside of the lobby in Pochfin, like, why do those things if you're also going to remove their ability to do micro jump drives faster anyways? All right, either way, we're going to keep going. Tech 3 destroyers now gain access to these lucrative sites, breaking Marauders' monopoly and creating a new arena for flexible, fast-moving fleets. This is actually a really great thing, in my opinion, because a lot of the people that do ESS raiding are actually wormholers. And so being able to just kind of go in with your little squad of Tech 3 destroyers, I've already heard some really good reports of that feeling really good. So I think that this part of the change is definitely really positive. You can now bring Tech 3 destroyers into the sites, which opens up a lot of possibilities for people. And then if I had to choose between an unbashed golem and a Barghest in a situation, I'm choosing the Barghest every time. Probably. I mean, so the Barghest is a pirate faction ship, so it's also going to be stronger. That's true. Although, I mean, paladins get used in PvP without bastioning a lot of the time. In general, you're right. Most of the time, we don't, like with fleets and stuff, we avoid Marauders because you can't assist them. You can't give them remote assistance when they're bastioned. So it tends to be that a faction ship is going to, especially a pirate faction ship or a Leshak or something like that, will be better than a Marauder in a lot of fleet-based scenarios. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely is still a purpose for the Marauders, although it's getting a lot of what made them special is being chewed at for sure. Either way. This change arriving today gives ripples far beyond Marauders, though. Drone assist mechanics, long exploited by massive multi-boxing fleets, have been reined in, creating a healthier balance between coordination and firepower. Ships that have been fallen into... So with that one, okay, so what they've done is... So back in the day, there was a concept called slow cats, where carriers, most of the time it's carriers, would take sentries and drop them, and then everybody would slave them off to one person, and then that one person would like target paint or something to get all of the drones to fire at the same time. It was, we called it finger of death, right? And this idea of like the drone bunny is a very common thing. So the way that they fixed this was they changed it so that way only 50 drones can be slaved off to a person at a time, right? Which would be 10 ships at a full flight of 5 drones each. So this means that most groups that are just using a normal drone bunny doesn't cause a big problem. But if you had like a bunch of, say, rattlesnakes that you tried to do it with, it wasn't quite as friendly for that kind of thing. And that was kind of the point, right? Well, what they've done is they've limited it to only 20 now per... Really? Here we go. Reduce the maximum number of drones that can be assigned to a character from 50 drones to 20 drones. We're cutting down the number of drones that can be assigned to a single character at a time from 50 to 20. There are things that we like about the drone assistance. There are skillful elements of assigning drones to someone else when you're jammed, damped, or out of range. There's also some niche gameplay, such as assigning drones to an interceptor to decloak players at gate camps, assigning light drones to a dedicated anti-frigate ship in PvE, such as incursions or PvP. And you can assign drones if you're doing some specialized tasks like logistics. Further, if you're a new player and can assign drones to your more knowledgeable friends and fleet mates, you can focus on piloting your own ship. We feel like dropping from down to 20 drones will still keep most of those cool cases intact while cutting down on undesirable gameplay. So what that means is that basically instead of 10 people can assign their full drones, only 4 people can, right? So you've got the 4 people's assigned drones plus the 1 person who's the drone bunny's drone. So a total of 25 drones under a single control. This is, I feel like this change is largely unnecessary. The only real place where I've seen this as being like an oppressive problem is rattlesnake fleets, right? Like if everybody drops sentries and then everybody slaves off their sentries to one ship, they can still do the kind of the finger death thing. But what's weird about that is that 20 drones is still 10 rattlesnakes, because rattlesnakes get 2. This is technically, I would argue that this is a rattlesnake buff, not a rattlesnake nerf, because the fact that rattlesnakes only use 2 at a time makes them even better. Algos multi-boxers. Yeah, that is an interesting issue, but if you think about it, how many of those Algos multi-boxers are going around with groups of larger than 5? Because a group of 5 can still all slave off their drones to one person. So this does absolutely zero to fix Algos multi-boxers in faction warfare. This does absolutely very, very little to fix anything that a Guristas ship might be able to do, like a well, either a Gila or a rattlesnake. This literally is just like, hey, EOS's and Dominic's, screw you in particular. Like, this really does feel a lot like that. You know, EOS's did a lot to bring sentries back into the meta, and they've been nerfed multiple times because of this, and this feels like kind of the final death knell in that sort of thing. But it's so weird how much it fails to actually address anything that I would think would be a reason why you'd want to make this kind of change. There's also, they've made it so that sentry drones are just generally easier to hit as a follow-up as well. So rip some drum comps for the AT. Well, again, like most groups in the AT, are you going to have more than 4 people slaving their drones off the same person? Maybe, maybe not. It's not like I just don't see this as being that big of an impact, except for people that might have cared about it. You have to have had. It reminds me of like incursions, right? Where we would all slave off our drones to the drone bunny, and that's like 10, 15 people. So in that case, we probably got more than 20 people. But like, I don't know, man. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I don't remember the last time anybody complained that there was more than 20 drones slaved off to a single person. These things do happen, in fact, in PvP and stuff. But 5 people slaved off at the same time is still quite a bit. I don't know. We'll see. Ships that have fallen into obscurity, such as the Confessor, Svitpol, and Harbinger Navy issues, now return to relevance with buffs that make them more viable. So one of the other weird things about this patch is the idea that we now have logistics destroyers, sort of. They've taken the Confessor and the Svitpol, which is also really weird because, okay, in general, the Amar and the Kaldari are more fleet-oriented. That's why they go with information and their tank type as their boosts, and their Logi are more based around spider tanking. Whereas Galente and the Mimitar are mostly based around solo skirmishy stuff. That's why they have, better survivability bonuses when it comes to like plate reductions, rep bonuses, etc., etc. But they, so what they've done is they've given the Confessor and Svitpol remote Logi capabilities. So there's a new defense mode bonus where the Confessor gets bonus to remote armor repair, and the Svitpol gets a bonus to remote shield repair. And they also increase its speed and its damage for both of them. Now, the Svitpol used to be super, super strong. When T3 destroyers first came out, the Svitpol was by far the most strongest one. It was oppressive for a long time, like for 2 years, and it kind of became the symbol of CCP not balancing the game. So that way, when the Svitpol got struck down, finally, like, nobody really complained about it. And the Svitpol has been the weakest one ever since. And, we were talking about that before, I think last week. Confessor Sipple has 2 utility highs. Jackdaw Hecate have only have 1. Well, yeah, but you could have fixed that too, Setonia. My point is that it's kind of odd that it's Amar and Minmatar, because you would expect it to be just like on paper, you would expect it to be that the remote rep T3 destroyers would be the Confessor and the Jackdaw, right? With the Sipple and the Hecate being much more skirmishy and independent local tank type character, but that isn't what we got here. We get these remote repair bonuses on the Confessor and the Sipple specifically, which is going to be confusing from now on, but whatever. And the other weird thing about this, though, is that these ships use Hecate Jackdaw get the super agility bonus and prop mod too. See, I would have switched that up, because I would have thought that the Jackdaw, the Amar ship and the Caldari ship would be the ones with the remote reps, while the Galente ship and the Minmatar ship be the one that have the higher agility. That's just what I would expect based on the ships. The fact that the Jackdaw gets the agility bonus and the Sipple gets the rep bonus feels backwards to me. But it is what it is. But what also is weird about this change is that, like, most ships that have a rep bonus, I think every single ship that is designed to remote rep, like as a concept, has a bonus for a remote rep. One of the bonuses is for range, right? Because small reps... Let's look up. This is not good. Ah, that's not going to work. Let's go with remote. Small remote. What is happening with my keyboard? Why is everything going wrong today? So the small remote armor repairer as a base only has a range of 9 kilometers, 8.5 kilometers, 9 kilometers. And the shield booster has a range of 5 kilometers with a fall off of 7,800 kilometers. So really, like, these are like within 10 kilometers of each other. So the fact that, like, small reps are notoriously short-ranged. And so these things are going to be basically required to be in a little ball if they're going to operate in this kind of remote rep capabilities. I don't think that T3 ships should have a remote range bonus. You obsolete T2 Logi ships if you do that. I'm not saying that they should. I'm just saying that it's odd that, like, everything about this change is just a little bit odd. And I get it's more just a small bonus to encourage spider tanking rather than a dedicated logistics bonus. The main buff is speed and damage. I get that, Setonia, but the problem is that, like, that spider tanking means that they are absolutely the only time that you're going to be able to spider tank these ships is anchored, right? They'd have to be directly on top of each other, basically, to ensure that they can rep each other. The bonuses came about from ESS Confessor Sipple fleets being a bit weird, that they needed to bring logistics cruisers with them. I mean, I understand, Setonia. It's a tough challenge. It's a tough challenge. I think that I mean, I'm not saying that this is a bad change per se. It's just a bit weird. I have had some people talk to me about doing T3 destroyers in ESSs using remote reps, and they've been having a lot of fun with it. So it is working out, at least on some level. I just find it a little bit odd is all. All right, cool. And then the Harbinger Navy issue got its power grade increased, which is good. The Harbinger Navy issue is a really good ship, but it has kind of struggled to keep up, especially with some of the other Navy issue ships, so that's fine. Now return to relevance with buffs that make them more viable. Meanwhile, the Ferox Navy issue, Ferox Navy issue has been one of the most dominant ships for a while, and a lot of the trouble that we're going to see in this patch is directly around everything that's touching the Ferox Navy issue is getting burned. So Cyclone Fleet issue, also very, very dominant ship. And other overperforming hulls have been adjusted, loosening their grip on Capsuleer tactics. So the Ferox Navy issue, where is it? Ferox Navy issue is having its medium hybrid damage bonus reduced by 25%. It's having its tracking reduced by to what is that, 2/3? Power grid is reduced to power grid and CPU is reduced to the same as a regular Ferox, which is again really odd because like Navy by definition usually means more resources, more tank, better tracking, and this kind of breaks that mentality. It still has the better tracking, it still has the better tank a little bit, but it doesn't have any better fitting. And then reduction in shield booster power and CPU requirements per level improved from 7.5 to 10%. So this is actually designed to help compensate for this, right? So, you know, a lot of times shield ships require good amounts of fitting because they want to fit oversized shield boosters, right? And so the idea that this shield booster has a reduction in how much it uses is going to help compensate for a lot of this to make its tank still the same. But for people that try to like deck out the weapons or other pieces like that, it's going to be a lot more of a struggle. So we're making some adjustments specifically to Ferox Navy issue to address its dominance in the fleet meta, specifically reducing the damage, tracking, and reducing the power grid and CPU that it has, setting it back to the same values that the regular Tech 1 Ferox has. This should mean that it is viable, but make it harder to fit a 5 to 6 slot tank in a DLA with railguns without fitting modules. At the same time, we're improving the shield booster fitting bonus, which should compensate active tanking fits with a fitting reduction to make up for the loss in power, base power grid and CPU. See, because a lot of people would just ignore the shield booster power, because if you have Logi, then you would just want to go with resistances and shield hit points. But those modules don't get any reduction. So at that point, you just have less resources to work with, right? Additionally, we know that there are concerns about the dominance of other railgun ships that many may simply replace the FNI as the top meta railgun ship, and those are being the Vulture, Ferox, Naga, and Roke. So we're going to make some adjustments to rails overall. Okay, so this is another big one. So this kind of goes back to how things stay in the meta overall, right? So Feroxes, Rokes, and that kind of stuff has always been incredibly dominant in the meta when it comes to large-scale fleet fights. And the reason why is because when it comes to large-scale fleet fights in particular, the idea is that you have the numbers to compensate for low damage, right? So in those kinds of fleet fights, long-range weapon systems ends up being very dominant. Your ability to out-project your opponent becomes a very strong tool, especially in Apex fights over, you know, large structures that have huge safe zones where you can be tethered and therefore kind of dictate range pretty good. These ideas of like a giant fleet of Feroxes. Feroxes have always been a really, really solid fleet comp, because basically the idea is that if you have enough people, you can just alpha through things, and the railguns provide the longest damage available, like the long range available. So if you're going to outrange your opponent, those are the tools that you're going to use, right? You're going to use Feroxes, you're going to use Rokes, you might use Nagas. Nagas are a little bit harder because they don't have the tank. So Feroxes are good for the battlecruiser level, and Rokes are usually pretty common when they step up to the battleship level, right? But this is why those are so dominant, especially the Roke and stuff, like things with resistances and rails end up being this really, really effective tool, because you can project out and you have the numbers to magnify your low damage enough that it's no longer low damage, it's just damage, you can still alpha through things, and it becomes an incredibly effective strategy. The Ferox Navy issue takes this concept and kind of amps it up a little bit, and so that's why it became so dominant. So, because of that, recently they did buff railguns. Hybrids have always been one of those things that, like, it's either the absolute weakest, like, barely functional weapon system, or it's the overpowered weapon system. Just because it's the most extreme. Blasters are the shortest range, highest damage. Rails are the longest range weapon system in the game. But they're known for having pretty piss poor tracking. Some of that was improved a little bit ago, and then now they're cutting railguns back down a bit. So railguns have had their tracking reduced by 10% and had their optimal and fall off reduced by 10%. So a little bit of the extreme ranges of the railguns have been cut off, and then the tracking, which has always been the weakness of railguns, has also taken a hit. Railgun, I would honestly, if you're going to do all this, I do think this is fine. I would have asked for compensation to be made to Tech 2 railgun ammo short range, so that way we can get a little bit of that tracking back if we're fighting in short range, just for people that happen to use railguns in PvE. But either way, here we are. Railguns are dominating at all sizes, so we're going to reduce their tracking and optimal and fall off slightly for medium and large railguns. Medium railguns have been very strong for a very long time now, while large railguns have recently taken the top slot since Viridian expansion, where we gave a significant buff to the Roke with a tracking rate and rate of fire bonus. Yes, blanket buff on all small hybrids. That's true. This will mean that most of the tracking speed bonus for the large railguns got rolled back, maintaining about 3.5% of it. So it still gets some of the speed bonus from earlier, but they'll keep the rate of fire bonus that they received. We hope that this will mean that large rails will land in a good spot between now, super dominant, and pre-Viridian, considered weak. We will continue to keep a close eye on the Vulture, Ferox Navy issue, Roke, and Naga after this set of changes, and make further adjustments to the upcoming expansion if needed, whether they continue to be dominant or end up too weak. It's also worth noting that there was another change. Oh, hold on. I have to take this phone call real quick. Let me put on a video for you guys.
EVE Online is a vast universe, alive with the unrelenting activity and combined history of its players. Pursuing lives of adventure, warfare, and prosperity, they share this existence in the biggest single shard, free-to-play MMO of all time. Set 21,000 years in the future, EVE takes place in a distant cluster of over 7,000 star systems known as New Eden. It is a rich and diverse universe, featuring densely populated havens of relative safety, governed by 4 great empires. Hostile systems, where player alliances make the rules. Even regions of anomalous and unexplored space that hold their own secrets. You play as a Capsuleer, a revered breed of highly trained pilot, having achieved immortality through the use of cloning technology. You navigate the universe encased in an armored capsule deep within your ship, where you have complete neural control and function as one. There are hundreds of ships to fly in Eve. Everything from small, nimble craft and versatile mid-range vessels to formidable warships and colossal freighters. Each has advantages and suited roles, but all are completely customizable as you decide how to equip and arm them. What you do in New Eden is entirely up to you. Eve's immense sandbox gives you the opportunity to choose between multiple professions and activities. The key to this unique customization of your playstyle is skill training. This is a passive process, and it continues whether you are in or out of game. As a new player, you can focus on one specific area in order to quickly reach the same level of specialization as a veteran. So be adventurous and explore new avenues of development for your character, as you can always change role and reinvent yourself if desired. If you want to fight, combat in Eve can involve solo missions against non-player adversaries, or small group skirmishes, while for some, it can even be the thrill of fleeting up with thousands of fellow pilots and battling over disputed territory. If you want to explore, then the discovery of uncharted space and ancient regions that promise riches, danger, and adventure await you. You can also engage in the business of prosperity, be it industry, mining, or even interstellar piracy. The beauty of life in New Eden is that all of these activities, and many more, can be done alone or with others. A unique in-game market, unprecedented in scale and degree of player control, is the beating heart of New Eden. Players are responsible for the manufacture of almost everything you can buy or sell. The gathering and refinement of resources, the building of ships, equipment, and even some space stations. Eve's players are core to how the universe is filled and how the economy thrives. Players in Eve can band together to form corporations, where they can enrich their experience, learn new elements of gameplay, and share their wealth and goals. When these player-run corporations grow to become larger entities, they can merge with other corps to form alliances. Powerful alliances regularly compete for control and influence over large areas of space, waging wars and engaging in record-breaking battles. Even taking down well-defended, sprawling, player-built space stations. In the spirit of exploration and mystery, new content and experiences are constantly introduced into the universe, with over a decade of free expansions leading to continual development and evolution of gameplay. While every action and decision has consequences for the universe and its hundreds of thousands of players, the game remains very much about your unique adventure and story. A story that will forever be woven into the fabric of Eve.
All right. Sorry about that. My son is continuing to have some trouble at school. I might get another phone call here, but we're just gonna keep powering through until I can't anymore. Okay, so here we go. We were just talking about the Ferox Navy issue, Cyclone Fleet issue. Cyclone Fleet issue. Oops. Had its max velocity reduced by 10 meters per second, so just about, what, 5% almost? And then, what just happened? What? Why did it do that? That was weird. Why did my structure just do that? Huh. Weird. Okay. Either way, so the Cyclone Fleet issue is a bit healthier than the Ferox Navy issue, but still overperforming somewhat. We're reducing the speed slightly and also reducing the signature radius reduction bonus to the same as the Hyena to remove some of the mitigation it has. It's evolving, yes. Okay. Even the venerable battleships like the Apocalypse and Maelstrom have been reworked, the former leaning into its sniper role, while the latter gets new resilience on the front lines. Power core ejected. I hope not. What happened? No? Doesn't look like it. I don't see any... I see no reason why that would have just happened right now. That's so weird. Either way. So, the Apocalypse... Where is it? Okay, so the Apocalypse removed the energy turret tracking bonus per level, and then instead giving it an optimal range bonus improvement to 10% from 7.5% per level, and then added damage and added reduction in large energy capacitor cost per level. So this is actually a pretty big one. Like, the Apocalypse is already designed to kind of be the snipery one of them all. The extra damage is pretty good. The reduction in tracking. So beam weapons are considered to be one of the better tracking of the long-range weapon systems. So that should be fine. This increase in optimal range and in damage and in capacitor cost means that it's going to be a lot easier to have heavier beam racks on your Apocalypse. And then also with the Apocalypse Navy issues, kind of the same concept. It'll be interesting to see whether or not, like, whether the Apocalypse can outrange the Roke now. Let's go ahead and look. So if we open up fitting window and go to hulls, we can go to the Roke. I don't think I have a fit for the Roke. So if I go to modules, turrets and launchers, hybrid turrets, railguns, large railguns, biggest large railgun I can find, base range 97 to 124. If we go to Apocalypse and we find the largest beam tachyon, we have 99 to 124. Oh my god, yeah. So the entire the between these two changes, you basically have made it so that the Amarr battleship is going to be able to effectively outrange the Roke in shooting, which is pretty crazy. If you can use the Scarab launcher on deployables like the MTU, or is it just ships? I think it's just ships, if I remember correctly. All right. Let's keep it going. These changes add up to the battlefield, which is less predictable, more diverse, and ultimately more exciting. Capsuleers will find themselves revisiting ships that they've long ignored, reconsidering doctrines, and adapting the strategies in the face of the meta that is cracking wide open. I wouldn't necessarily say wide open, but sure. And okay, so that is... Let's look at through the patch notes, rebalancing things, make sure we didn't miss anything. So we have... maximum number of drones, we did that one. Sentry drones, armor rigs. So armor rigs are now going to have a drawback of agility instead of max velocity. This is actually a really interesting one. It does specifically, like they said, they're going to make ships more, like armor ships more agile. Remember that armor rigs that do agility are resistance mods or rigs and the hit points rigs, like the rigs that affect logistics, like repping power. Those actually do not do max velocity, and so those didn't get changed at all. This is only a change for rigs that either affect your resistance or affect your raw hit points. Yeah, then there's a new skill, Advanced Armor Layering, which is 2% reduction to mass penalty and armor plates per level. It's a rank 5 skill, and it is pretty much completely useless from everything I've been able to see. Let's go ahead and look real quick. So, Armor Layering as a skill was already pretty weak, but it provides a 5% reduction to armor mass penalty, whereas the Advanced Armor Layering is only a 2% reduction. So getting Advanced Armor Layering to 5 is the equivalent to getting Armor Layering to 2 when it comes to how much of a reduction it is, which is pretty wild, right? Like, because Armor Layering, a normal Armor Layering is a ×3, and this is a ×5. So you're spending way more skill points to get way less effect. And people were looking at, like, across the board, almost every single level. I haven't seen a single person coming up with a good argument for the Advanced Armor Layering skill. In many cases, it doesn't actually change the agility or the stats of a ship in any meaningful way between Advanced Armor Layering 1 and 5. So I don't know. I don't really like this skill at all. It might have been a typo, 20% instead. I mean, they could have done that, but they haven't done it yet. We've heard concerns that shield setups are dominating and armor doesn't feel great for skirmishing now. To help address this, we're introducing a new advanced skill to shave off a bit more mass from armor plates and changing the drawback on most armor rigs to penalty of agility instead of max velocity. That's going to make things slower. So this agility change is going to make things slower to get up to speed, but it still has the higher max velocity, and that's fine. This will still keep the original design intent and trade-off that exists within armor shield rigs that reduce some of your ability to mitigate damage in exchange for more tank. It is interesting in the fact that, like, this is, in a weird way, like a nerf of hull tanking, right? Because a lot of times, armor tanks will give you more hit points, but it has this drawback, whereas rig or hull tanking, their drawback is usually like cargo, so you're able to go fast and have hit points if you go hull tanking. This is like, with all of these new mass penalty reductions in ships and here, it's becoming more and more viable to just go with armor plates instead of hull setups. I want armor hacks to be a thing again. I do too. I just don't know if this is necessarily it right here, and especially not the... Well, the armor rig change might be interesting, but like this advanced armor layering is basically nothing. The problem with agility makes you sig tank less. Well, speed is also going to make you sig tank less. This is just about a matter of like how fast it takes for you to get up to speed, right? So you have a higher top end. Losing turning speed and handling means you won't be able to orbit as tightly or get as high angular velocity as before. It also means that you're going to take longer to align. But now you also won't be giving up range control anymore, which should make them feel much more better on the field. We hope that this will make armor more viable, especially at smaller scales, and help promote more ships that have fallen out of favor, such as armor hacks. Yeah, I don't know, man. Making them go a little bit faster is probably good. This armor rig change is probably pretty decent to armor hacks, but again, this isn't addressing the problem. Hull tanking will still make you more agile. The new armor penalties make time to warp much longer. I agree that hull tanking will still make you will make you more agile, but the point is that, like, the idea of I need to be fast, not just agile but fast, and plates slowing you down versus hull that doesn't, it's just more reason to go with armor over hull. Not that hull tanking can't be good, but it's just more reason to go with armor over hull, which maybe maybe that's what's needed, because like people are starting to hull tank things that I would never have expected to be hull tanked. Remember to use abyssal rolled stuff. It's a little extra cost. Yeah, that's true. All right. Encounter surveillance systems increase the range that players are unable to cloak in the main bank from 150 to 500 kilometers. That's good. So now people can't just decloak and shoot you. Marauders. Again, I think that Marauders got 3 different kinds of nerfs in this update, and it's kind of wild. Vargur's got their fall off nerfed, which matches kind of a little bit the Paladin nerf that happened a couple months ago. So I don't necessarily think that this is like the end of the Marauder world, especially for those of us who use them in missions. It's just we're going to have to get used to this kind of thing. Hold on.
A major conflict in wormhole space concluded this weekend with the eviction of the Alliance Forsaken Few from their home in J127.09.15, a Class 4 pulsar system known as Hoth. Defending forces, led by CEO Dreadfather Lennox, mounted a formidable stand around their heavily fortified structure grid, including a Keepstar, one of the last 2 remaining in wormhole space. This grid was also supported by Sotios, Fortizars, and Astrahusas. The eviction was executed by a Hard Knocks-led coalition that included their allies from Laserhawks, no vacancies, Blue Loot, not included, Charna Compania, and others. Operational command was organized by veteran fleet commanders Jimmy Michaels and Victor Pavalman of Hard Knocks, along with Ixalia and Michael 1995 of Laserhawks. The operation was coordinated over the span of several months by a joint team of multiple senior strategists across the coalition. Both sides deployed heavily shield-tanked fleets to exploit the system's pulsar effects. Forsaken Few fielded over 30 Phoenix Navy-issue dreadnoughts, while the attackers committed more than 300 rogues and 60 vultures. The pivotal engagement took place early on the morning of August 3rd, over a Fortizar timer, just ahead of the Keepstar hull timer. Despite suffering the loss of over 150 rogues, the evictors obliterated Forsaken Few's capital and sub-capital fleets. Efforts by allied wormhole groups to reinforce Forsaken Few by way of rage rolling for wormhole connections in their homes were hampered, both by corporate espionage and counteroffensives by the evicting coalition. Despite attempting to roll into Hoth throughout the weekend, these groups were ultimately unsuccessful in altering the battle's outcome. Shortly after the conclusion of the final battle for Hoth, the evicting coalition destroyed the Forsaken Few Keepstar, along with all other structures in their home system. Only one Keepstar now remains in wormhole space. The Goran-clade Feathertar, which was defended from eviction by the same coalition earlier this year. This eviction marks the final chapter of the War in Heaven, a war in high-class wormhole space that saw a coalition of alliances led by Singularity Syndicate attempt to wrest control of valuable C6 wormholes away from Laserhawks. The aggressors were ultimately defeated, with most of the alliances involved surrendering or collapsing entirely. Forsaken Few, the last holdout, refused post-war surrender and continued to defy the victors until now. This is Lena Amber, reporting for The Scope.
Sorry. All right, let's jump back into this. My son's on his way home, walking home. This is going to be fun, having to figure out how today's going to go. But let's keep on going into this. Let's see, where were we? Oh yeah, other changes to balance. Oh, the Bastion module, armor repair and shield boost amount reduced, but there is a reduction in cycle time and capacitor cost. This is a direct and nerf towards things like ancillary shield boosters, where so the idea is that you use ancillary shield boosters that have a big amount of rep per cycle, but you don't have to pay the capacitor because you use cap boosters instead. But because they have limited size, amount of cap boosters that can be fit into it and a long reload time, having each cycle be worth less but cycle faster just means that you're going to go through your charges faster. But for a normal ship that just has normal reps, it'll just be able to continue to rep as if nothing had ever happened. So yeah. As far as so there is some lore about the idea that Vanguard-like clones, the Shrieker clones, do get used in breacher pods, but those only last for 10-15 seconds, so it wouldn't really make sense for you to play through that. The idea of boarding other people's ships, I don't think that that's where they're going with Vanguard at all. There's the 20%. Which 20%? What do you mean? Eve Vanguard is a reference to an old Eve video? What? Either way, this retains the current repair effectiveness over time. If you log out and the FPS players have to wait a week for you to log back in so they can continue the engagement. No, so this is why in my old video, in the writing that I made back in 2015 or whatever, I thought of having the shooter relate to structure defenses, so that way there's a timer and everything, so there can be a fight on the inside of the structure, on the outside of the structure at the same time. But it is true that if there's anybody acting on your ship when you log out, your ship will just stay in space until all of your flags are done. So that even if you did that, that would be fine. Oh, Vanguard 6 in the Future Vision trailer? Interesting. That's a good point. All right, so let's see. Or even exceeding their maximum armor hit points when using Asclepians, blah, 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 blah. Okay, tactical destroyers can now enter the ESS. We talked about Confessors and Spitballs already. Ferox Navy issue, we talked about getting cut down. Medium, large railguns, we talked about that. The Naglfar has had a low slot. Naglfar and Naglfar Fleet has had a low slot move to a mid slot. So a little bit less damage potential, a little bit less armor tank potential, better shield potential. Another opportunity for a web. The Sin got a big, interesting buff with this Warp Scrambler range and bonus Warp Scrambler strength per level. Makes the Sin able to basically scram every single thing in... every subcapital ship in the game, regardless of warp core stabilizers or inherent warp core stability or anything like that. If you're scrammed by a Sin, that is 7 or 8 points of scram strength, which is basically impossible to beat at this point. So That's a big difference. Although I'm a little bit sad that the logistics drone side of things, because like the idea that the Sin was like the Logi drone, or the Logi version of the Black Ops was always kind of fun, but making them the E-War warp scrambler, keep the person there instead of the Arazu, is pretty interesting for sure. The Apocalypse we talked about already. The Maelstrom. It is now true that there is, I think, so there's no Mimitar ships that have 8 turret hardpoints in the large turret category, which I find kind of interesting. But it has had a large damage bonus to replace the rate of fire bonus to make it so that it's still going to do the same, roughly the same amount of damage. Hey, what's up, Santiago? I actually really well. Okay, you're right. So the Tornado still has 8 large turrets. Fair enough. I'm actually really excited about what the Vanguard connection means for us, and we'll talk about that in a little bit, hopefully. But yeah, the Maelstrom. I've heard a lot of people not overly happy about this update overall, but I think it should be fine. Overall, I don't know. I'm not too worried about this. Megathron Navy issue did get its tracking bonus improved to make up for those rails nerfs, and another reduction in armor plate mass penalty per level, or not another, but they got it. And their maximum velocity is improved. So the Megathron Navy issue is going to be a lot faster than before, and have better tracking with rail guns, which is going to be kind of an interesting idea overall. I'll have to see how this plays out. I wish that they had also given some extra tracking to like the Megathron, but it's always been kind of weird because like the Gallente were always the blaster focused ones and the Caldari the rail focused ones, but all the Caldari rail guns just got nerfed and the Gallente one just got buffed when it comes to application. So could be cool. All right. The Cenotaph. So the new ships, the Deathless ships, have had a pretty large impact on the game. They are still very expensive for what they are, but they're very strong. So, well, this doesn't affect Baltic because Baltic is standard Megathron, not Megathron Navy. Tracking bonus will help blaster build. That's true. That's actually true. Yeah, this will make blaster megas even more like viable because they'll actually have the tracking. Blasters already have really good tracking, but large weapons have a difficult time applying, so this will let them apply better. That's a good point. All right, so in the same way as like the Dreadnought, or not the Dreadnoughts, but the Marauders, they're trying to fix the Cenotaph and the Tholos less by making them less good at what they're good at, i.e. the Breacher Pods, and more about making them vulnerable. And so, ironically enough, they got a lot of buffs in this change for somebody's talking about how oppressive they are. But the biggest thing here is that the Cenotaph and the Tholos, the Breacher Pods want to spread out their Breacher Pods, right? Because like the Breacher Pod lasts for a little bit of time, but the Breacher Pod cycles faster than it launches. So the idea is that you want to launch it at like different people to get as many people infected by your Breacher Pods as possible over time. So the counter to that is that the Cenotaph and the Tholos have both had their sensor strength, i.e. their capacity to be jammed, reduced. So now it's easier to jam out a Cenotaph and Tholos. And when you're jammed out, you can only target the thing that is jamming you. So in these cases, only the ship that is actually jamming the Cenotaph and the Tholos can be affected by the Breacher Pod once they've been jammed. And then they've also had their armor hit points reduced, their structure hit points reduced or improved, which is kind of odd. And it had its low slots reduced from 3 to 2. So much more focused on a shield setup or a hull setup than a armor setup now. And they also got a bonus to compensate for this. They got a bonus to their actual weapon systems, like their non-breacher pod weapon systems, in a bonus to projectile turret and heavy assault missile damage, up by 25%. And they also go a little bit faster, and they're a little bit more agile. The T1 Griffin at 60 kilometers. Yeah, I mean, like, that can be a way to do it. I personally like the Griffin Navy issue with their jam drones. But yeah, so we're hearing a lot of complaints about Cenotaph strength from wormholers and to a lesser extent other areas of space where they can be very expensive, high resistance ships are used at very close range around fixed locations. These fits allow the Cenotaph to survive even with a 3-slot tank. In this environment, things like range and speed don't matter much. We are making a set of adjustments for the Cenotaph to try and retain its strength in other areas of space where it is not as dominant, while adding more meaningful counterplay options to Deathless ships as a whole. We're reducing the sensor strength of the Deathless ships to make ECM a very effective counter against them, especially in wormhole environments where their very close-range missiles are not as much of a disadvantage as they are in other areas of space. This should hopefully allow wormholers a more reliable counter while preserving a lot of the strength in other environments, where it is difficult to ever get close to their maximum potential paper DPS output. ECM is also not very punishing in situations where you only have dot on 1 to 2 targets. Since as long as you can lock every 75 seconds, then you can keep up the damage. But ECM is very effective at lowering the total DPS across a whole field, since even a 25% chance to jam results in dropping the number of pods spread in an optimal scenario from 7 to 5. Additionally, we're shifting some hit points from armor away into structure to make armor tank Cenotaphs more vulnerable and taking away a low slot, which would make heavy armor Cenotaphs much less viable. To compensate for it, the lost low slot, and buff it in situations where it is using the low slot for tank. Where it isn't using the low slot for tank, we're improving the damage roll bonus and also giving it some extra speed and agility to partially compensate for the potential loss of modules, such as nanofibers and gyro stabilizer ballistic controls. So yeah, definitely pushing it more towards a shield tank. We'll have to see how that plays out. They're very expensive ships. Cyclone Fleet issue we talked about. Harbinger Navy issue we talked about. Myrmidon Navy issue. The drone capacity has been increased, so now they can have a full extra set of medium drones, which means that they can carry those web drones that they use without actually like interfering with any of the other setups. And they also get a +10 bonus to drone tracking per level, which makes them pretty good for sentries, potentially. Myrmidon Navy issue is still the least used battlecruiser in the game. We're giving the powerful tracking bonus to match the VNI and then improving the drone capacity on it so it has more options and harder to defang, and can include more utility drones like web drones as bonus too. You know what they should have done? Web drone range bonus increased by like 500%. Make those web drones actually be able to reach things. Cenotaph debuff could make for some hilarious engagements. Like what? Tornado has had its agility nerfed, its max velocity increased, and its fall-off bonus improved. So it actually can fire further. It aligns a little bit slower, but does go a little bit faster. We've heard some frustrations when it comes to dealing with low align time, warp speed rigged, artillery fit NATOs, wind runners. So we're making an adjustment to the NATO, which should hurt it in this role, but buff it in other roles. We're nerfing the agility enough so it'll be much harder to get it under a 4-second align time on the Tornado, making this type of fit a lot more vulnerable to being caught. To compensate it for its nerf, we're buffing the base speed of the NATO and improving the fall-off bonus per level it has. The net outcome of this, hopefully, is that one-runner fits are less effective and can be caught more easily, but NATOs are staying on the field, feel stronger. This is an interesting one because, like, okay, so its align time is less, but it actually, so like a NATO usually wants to sit there until it's able to fire and then leave, right? So the thing about having the agility up, like you can be moving, but the faster that it moves, the more likely it'll get outside of its target, like preferred ranges before it can actually fire. So this fall off bonus is interesting to compensate for this, but this means that like pre-aligning your NATOs is a little bit harder. And of course, not aligning your NATOs means that you're going to now take 5 seconds to align instead of 4. Like Ewar locking the Cenotaph and having an Alpha striking the T1 ship one at a time and not being able to do anything. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Jams are fun, has become increasingly a fun mechanic. Or gate gun range. What is gate gun range? I can't remember what gate gun range is. I don't feel like... I have not seen too many people do this like under 4-second alignment tornado as being like the biggest thing in the world. But could be good, I guess. The Talos max velocity increased from 220 to 235. I actually, once again, don't really like this that much because I use it for structure grinding, and I want them to be fully aligned, and the faster it goes, the longer it, or the harder it is to keep fully aligned. That's why I put Higgs rigs on my Taloses for shooting at structures. This plus the rails nerf means that I don't see the Talos becoming any more dominant by this. The Deimos gets a signature radius reduction of a little bit under 30%, 25%, somewhere in there. The Deimos had a very large signature radius for brawling armor hack, moving it down to 120, which places it between the Vagabond at 115 and the Zealot at 125, so it can mitigate more damage. This should help it when brawling and in A-hack rolls. I really like this. I haven't really played around with the Deimos much since then. It's a good ship, and it just recently got a new model, so that's a cool one. I think that they'd rather Battleship be used for structure grinding. Okay, but like the Talos is the structure grinding ship outside of trig ships. Zealot rate of fire bonus replaced by damage, so that's pretty good. I mean, what's weird? So this helps its cap as well as its damage at the same time. It's a very small damage bump from 33% to 37%, but it'll help the Zealot a lot with cap stability since the guns will no longer be consuming as much capacitor per second, which also means the crystals will last longer before they break. This is just a generally good change for the Zealot, a good ship, but not necessarily in the meta at the moment. Ah, man, the Mamba gets a new roll bonus, 25% bonus to drone max velocity, and maximum velocity improved from 245 to 255. So it's a little bit faster, and this makes it more of a direct competition to the Algos as far as a drone ship goes, because the drone speed bonus is a huge deal when it comes to catching kitey ships. So, yeah, basically the faction destroyers are getting their missing destroyer bonuses. Exactly, Wizard. I like the joke that the Mecha Ball just stole the fall-off bonus from the Vargur, because that fits to me. The Angels stole the Mimitar's fall-off bonus and put it on their new destroyer. I definitely want to play around with the Mecha Ball more. I don't know. We'll have to see whether or not this makes it viable. I think that the Mecha Ball is a fun ship. I'd argue that the Oracle is a pretty good structure bashing ship since crystals let you shoot longer without reloading. Yes, Oracles are definitely the lazy man's structure basher, because you don't need to think about it. You don't need to worry about anything. You just keep shooting, and when everybody else says reload, you just remind everybody that you're an Oracle. That's true. All right, so the Mamba and Mecha Ball aren't quite at the power level expected for pirate destroyers in their current price point. We're buffing this by giving them an extra roll bonus, which currently all other T1 destroyers and Navy destroyers in the game get. Drone speed bonus, roll bonus that the Algos has, and the Mecha Ball gets fall off bonus, which stacks per level, just like the Kizriel. So then all of the Navy exploration ships are getting their capacitor tweaked. So they're getting their capacitor increased, but their recharge time also increased, which means that they're going to have more cap to work with before they burn out of it. But their cap recharge, like how much they're recharging, how much capacitor per second that they get, is going to stay largely the same. I still feel like the Fleet Thrasher is better than the Mecha Ball. That might be something to experiment with, but I think you're probably getting close to correct, but we'll see. Setting the Navy scanning frigates base capacitor amounts and capacitor recharge time to the same value as their naval racial counterparts. This will result them in having much higher base capacitor pools and slightly higher capacitor per second rates. It's difficult to use them in PvP because of how low their capacitor pool was, since they were unchanged from the base exploration frigates, so this should improve them. What? Hold on. setting the Navy scanning frigate base capacitor amounts and capacitor recharge time to the same values as their Navy racial counterparts. And then at the end it says, it was difficult to use them in PvP because of how their capacitor pool was, since they were unchanged from the base exploration frigates. What? These two statements contradict each other, right? Because, like... So... They're saying that they're changing it to be the same as the base values, but the reason why they struggled before was because they were the same from the original values. What? There's so much confusing stuff in these patch notes, man. Is that even true? Got it. Never mind. I got you. I got what you guys are saying. I understand it now. I understand it now. I understand it now. So what they're saying is that they're comparing it to other Navy racial counterparts. So like the Navy Hookbill and the Navy Comet, not the base exploration ships. Got it. I'm with you. Makes sense. Now then, my favorite in this whole thing, the Skybreaker and the Stormbringer now get an additional high slot. So they've got 2 high slots. They can have 1 utility high slot. This is a huge issue, or this is a huge thing. Yes, they can cloak, but more importantly, that means that my Stormbringer can have a tractor beam in the Abyss, and I can now have my roaming high-sec Stormbringer for that does dens and escalations and scans down sites. So... very, very, very happy about this Stormbringer getting an extra high slot. Very good. Very good. PC, power grid, and CPU values have not been changed. I did check both of those use cases that I was talking about. Both of them work fine. Outpost construction skill now gain a 1% reduction in level of manufacturing time for items that require this skill. That's just a little thing to give that skill some sort of value. The minimum requirement to join pirate faction warfare for pirates have been moved from -2 to 0. Some people have freaked out because, like, this is a pretty big change and people weren't ready for it, but they did warn us on the 26th of June. I don't know if this is necessarily going to fix AWOXing. I think that there are better solutions to fixing AWOXing, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. No, it won't. Yeah, so my biggest suggestion for fixing AWOXing is simple. If you perform an AWOX, your account or your character is not eligible to get LP for the next hour. That's it. Like, you can still complete sites or whatever, but like hit them with where they're at. Because the reason why they're AWOXing people is because you go into the site with them and they don't want you to finish the site with them. They either don't want to split the LP with them. Some of the times they do it even if, like, the site will, like, if it's a -3. So they're not actually losing any LP. They're just, like, mad at you for even daring to come in, right? But they're trying to make it so that they get the LP and not you. That's why they're AWOXing. And so I think that the real solution to deal with AWOXing is a flag that makes it so that for the next hour or so, after you shoot an ally, you are no longer eligible for any LP for completing faction warfare sites. That's it. That's all you need to do. You don't need these standings things or anything like that, because it's going to cause a lot of confusion when it comes to, like, maybe entire groups will get kicked out of faction warfare, or, you know, whatever. Like the faction warfare standing stuff, people will just roll new characters, whatever. That doesn't matter. The biggest thing is hit them where it hurts. They're trying to secure the site for themselves, so make it worthless to them. That's it. That's my idea. All right, insurgency rebalance. Reduces the base amount of systems needed to be won by from 7 to 5. Increases the ambition modifier from 13 to 15. So that way 20 systems is still the maximum. But it does make it so that, like, the loser only has to get to 5 instead of 7. Increase the weighting of frontline and command ops systems for the insurgency fob when choosing a system for the new insurgency, so it's more likely to choose those systems. They already did this once, and it seemed like it was pretty good, so I don't know how much more weighted to the frontline command ops that it needs to be. It already ends up at the same place over and over again because the front lines haven't moved that much, but whatever. Increase the weighting of the dominant control when a side owns 66% or more of the war zone so that the insurgency fobs are more likely to choose those systems. Also pretty good. This one's definitely going to be the more important one of the two, I think. Make it progressive, so the more you kill people in the faction, the longer the timer lasts. 1 hour for first events, 2 hours for second, 4 for third. I mean, that's sure if you needed to. I legitimately do not think it needs to be any more complicated than if you shoot a player that is on your team, you don't get LP rewards for faction warfare for the next hour. Like, because that makes it so somebody who makes a mistake can wear it off, you know, whatever. But like, it really cuts to exactly what that person is looking for. They're not looking for not getting kicked out. They're looking for earning LP. I haven't seen a relevant high-sec system get corrupted since Bay, and that was a while ago now. That a lot of that has to do with just like where the front lines are at the moment. Yeah. All right. Insurgency mining ambush sites increases the signature radius of the hijacker tie-pins and hijacker echoes from 25 to 80. So they're much easier to track, and also increase the shield hit points on Mordu's battleship NPCs by 50% to increase the time it takes to run the site a bit and give more opportunities for players to get caught while running the site. So they're making it easier to kill the small stuff, harder to kill the big stuff. Done. Empires also try to funnel it away from high sec. That's true. They've gotten all, yeah. Pro Empire players have gotten pretty fanatical at ensuring that the insurgencies don't spread into Empire space anymore. All right, and then this goes to what we talked about at the very beginning of the stream, which is that it is now possible to swap your character between male and female body models using the Resculpt certificate. And because of that, this week, and I believe this week only, you will get a free Resculpt certificate until September 16th only. So you must get it. You can get it on alphas and stuff. You just log in, grab it really quick in your login rewards or in the nest, and then hold on to it as long as you possibly want it. You know, it doesn't expire. But make sure you grab that today. And then Autothysian Lancers. In the aftermath of the Drifter Crisis, the Autothysian Lancers no longer have a presence in high security space. This is wild to me. Because, like, I don't know, this is a big deal. It's kind of funny. People every once in a while like get caught up by these things. It also makes them like people were farming them in systems with like a structure. What? Already grab? Oh yeah, I already grabbed that. Yeah. Then and then killing 2 playcells, no more hunting lancers to make intosises, and fobs are low sec only. Well, what's weird about... Okay, hold on. Wait. Do they still have drifters in Wormhole? Can you still find Tyrannoses in high sec? Because if there's no Tyrannos in high sec, and there's no Autothysian Lancers in high sec, well, if there probably still is Tyrannos, right? Yeah, the rewards for doing suppression aren't worth taking attention away from the front lines. Hunting named pirates is worth it, though. Yeah, but that also means that hunting named pirates require the corruption to go up. There are no wandering lancers anymore. But that doesn't mean that there aren't the drifters. The reason why I point this out is because people are talking about, like, okay, well, I can't farm Autothysian Lancers for Antikythera elements for Entosis links anymore. But without Autothysian Lancers running around everywhere, you know what is safer, potentially? The Jovian observatories. You can Entosis Jovian observatories to get Entosis links, or to get more Antikythera elements. And with less of these things roaming around, as long as the wormhole isn't open in that system, you should be able to harvest at your leisure from the site. I'm not sure. Also, fobs are no longer going to be in high sec. So, not this MER, but next MER, I am super... Yeah, you can get elements. You can get Antikythera elements from Entosising the observatories. No, you should be able to get Antikythera elements. That was one of the main places to get them originally. Like, the idea was that the reason why the drifters and the Lancers have Antikythera elements in their cargo hold. It's that they're pulling them out of the observatories. At least that's what my understanding was. Anyway, so forward operating bases are not being in high sec is kind of crazy. Obviously, like, so they've gotten rid of a lot of things that could just go wrong when it comes to people in high sec. You know, they got rid of a lot of the Rasnaborg stuff, so that way people wouldn't just get ganked by NPCs in belts. I've always thought that this was actually kind of a good thing when it comes to player understanding of the game, but, you know, whatever. Apparently we've lost that fight. But now they've actually removed Autothysian Lancers and Diamond Rats. So the Diamond Rats aren't going to be roaming around in a site to kill people, or in a system to kill people anymore. We no longer have to check to see if there's a fob up before we do our moon mining, which is fine. Is that true? Okay, maybe I could be wrong. I swear to God that was true. Maybe that's... I haven't necessarily done it myself. I'll have to double check that, wizard. But it says... It does not adequately teach new players about how to improve their survivability. I actually really fucking... See, this is what pisses me off about this. Because, like, especially with Rasnaborg, you can see them on D-scan. And I really used to like... well, the Lancers don't attack you unless you attack them. I like the idea that, like, something's going to kill you, and then you go, well, shoot, what was I supposed to do? And you could have kept an eye on D-scan. Because then if you look into how to fix the problem, you get immediately told to, like, keep an eye on D-scan, which is the exact behavior that a person needs to learn in order to keep themselves safe against even other players. I know, I get it. They were red. That's true. People would shoot them and then die. So, you know, whatever. It's a whole history of these things. But it's definitely going to be a bit of a different game now because of this. We'll have to see in the long run whether or not, you know, we have theories about whether or not they were good for retention or not. I still stand by the idea that these things are somewhat good for... No, yeah, the coalesced elements are... those are straight from the hives. Only the hives. Not the Antikythera element. The Antikythera element is for Entosis links. It's just funny because Autothysian Lancers were even renamed Autothysian Lancers from Circadian Seekers because they because the problem was they also put Circadian Seekers in the new player experience at the time, which meant that people would learn that they could fight them fine, and then they'd go out into the real world and then get stomped by one. And now that, you know, like, now they're being removed completely from high sec. So whatever. I think that, yeah, it's just kind of weird. I think Autothysian Lancers were super fine. Diamond Rats were much more disruptive. All right, missions and NPCs. Significantly increased NPC buy order quantities for the following commodities: rogue drone infestation data, neural network analyzers, sleeper data libraries, ancient coordinate database, sleeper drone AI nexus. So these are the more or less the blue loot plus rogue drone data. The reason why this is that when people are trying to sell order or to buy orders, NPC buy orders, they would have to break them into stacks. Now with larger buy orders, they can just sell everything all at once without as big of a problem. That's all that this is designed to do. Whenever I see a guy in a scan frigate and a wormhole, I say hi in local. There you go. Okay, so freelance jobs now include 3 new contribution methods, giving more options for corporations. Destroy specific capsuleers, so congratulations, there are now a bounty system in the game again. Remove a remote shield boost and remote armor repair for freelance jobs. It can be pretty good. It'll be really weird because, like, remember, freelance jobs, anybody can accept those. Major issue with Eve is that it's hard to tell a threat level of something at a glance. Only diamonds have a marker saying we will mess you up. Yeah, but I think that, again, like, I think that that's an okay thing for people to have to learn. That some things are spooky. You don't just shoot at everything. And I think that that's a valuable lesson to learn. And I think it's okay for a newer player to learn that lesson. But, oh well, whatever. Pochfin. Smaller scale sites have had some mechanical tweaks. All such sites now appear within the Triglavian Invasion Opportunities page, which is good. Yes, more Amazon mining missions. There you go. NPCs within Edencom scout fleets will no longer have mixed factions. They did that a while ago. Apparently they're going to be fixing that or tweaking that. It made them a lot less predictable. Battleship NPCs will no longer spawn during the first wave in these sites. Moved NPC spawn locations to reduce bumping with hackable container. Various improvements on how NPCs with these sites handle idling and swapping targets. 1 second. NPCs will now make more consistent use of their micro warp drives. And a rogue drone battleship will now always spawn during the second or third wave of the insipid drone swarm site. So they are continuing to improve the smaller scale sites, which I think is really good. And I want to do more of that sort of stuff. Maybe we can even do a fleet in on stream sometime soon. Adding the sites to the Triglavian invasion page has had their location visible at any range within the region. This should promote more purposeful movement around the triangle, while also offering a way for hunters to locate potential targets. Separating the Edencom sub-factions will mean that there are less types of E-War to deal with per instance. This should bring the difficulty of sites more in line with that of the Convocation Watchpoint. Lastly, the battleship spawning in the initial wave could result in swings in difficulty and time requirements. This is especially true for insipid drone storms. I don't mind swings in difficulty and time requirements. I don't mind that certain sites are going to be harder than others, which could take far longer when multiple battleships spawn. Now, battleships will only spawn during the second or third wave. A battleship spawn is guaranteed, both to supply standings gains and to ensure the site runtime in a decent length. Yeah, so this is actually going to make these overall a much better site to go do, especially if you want to get dual standings fleets with the rogue drone sites. Rebalance torpid sleeper hives distributions. Increase the number of sites present within the region from 6 to 3, so there's now going to be twice as many of the sleeper drifter sites than before. Decrease the optimal per pilot ISK payout to 27 from 33. And decrease the average number of stability telemetry commodities within the hackable container. So they slightly reduced the reward, but they increased the number of sites. So they're going to be easier to find them and run them back to back faster. Increase the optimal ISK per payout earned within the Convocation Watchpoint and Edencom scout fleets to 18 million from 15 million. This is an interesting one because so the rogue drone one and the drifter sleeper one are useful to a lot of people for dual standings as a primary. The Convocation Watchpoint is anti-trig, and the Edencom scout fleet is anti-Edencom, so neither of those are useful for dual standings. But they are increasing its reward, so if you're just trying to get it for money, you can now make more money doing those sites. 3 instances of the site proved to not enough to make demand, so the number of sites were doubled. Rewards have been rebalanced to compensate for the greater potential faucet. Convocation Watchpoint Edencom Scout Fleet sites continue to be less appealing than insipid drone swarms and torpid sleeper hives due to their negative standings effects. The payout increase aims to reward those who are willing to put up with the additional dangers that these sites standings hits cause. Optimal per pilot payouts for observatory flashpoint sites have been increased to 150 from 120. Microdrum drives can no longer be activated within the lobby of the observation flashpoint site, and the observation flashpoint failure timer will now only start when the initial guard NPCs are destroyed within the main combat area. The previous change to the site rewards has an outsized effect on groups running non-marauder setups. We're adjusting the payout value of these sites so it's still viable for these groups. To compensate for the reward reversion, a micro jump drive block has been added to the lobby of the sites. We've already talked about this. It's so weird to me that they are putting in a micro jump drive block at the same time as removing that bonus from the Marauders. This is intended to reduce the usefulness of Marauders within that area. A micro jump drive block does not affect the usefulness of Marauders versus other battleships or battlecruisers anymore. This doesn't make any sense. In addition, the site must now be fully in progress before the failure timer begins ticking down. This is to prevent players from re-rolling the site spawn without any effort. NPCs within Vigilant Point sites have had a number of balance changes. Vigilant Points were the sites that were created. Hold on. Dual standings, I tend to do Vigilant Point, but cannot find a way to boost Edencom standings in a similar difficulty in or out of Pochfin. Well, the Vigilant Point should give you Edencom standings too, right? And then, so Edencom standings are going to come from rogue drones and drifters in Pochfin and trig sites in K-Space. So like in trig minor victory standings. Wait, what? No. What? That's not possible. Wait. Huh? Is that true? How's that possible? Wait. Because a vigilant point gives you negative standings with drifters, right? Negative standings with drifters is the thing that gives you positive. That doesn't matter, though, Henry. What's happening is when you shoot the drifter, you get a negative standings hit with drifters. And that what's the word? Derives to both Triglavian and Edencom as a positive standings boost. As you lose standings with rogue drones and drifters, you gain standings with both Edencom and the Trig, right? So, in theory, vigilance points should still be functional for dual standings. Because you're losing standings with the drifters because that's who you're shooting at. But I'm not 100% sure on that. But yeah, otherwise, you can shoot at Trigs in K-Space. No, the Trigs are the ones that you're helping. So you lose Edencom from helping the Trig with them last, what I saw. That's crazy. Okay, well, that's something that we should test out and look at. You should... Most of the time with these kinds of sites, you're losing standings with one target, which is what's causing the gained standings in the other, right? That's why shooting at Edencom gains you standings with Trig. Shooting Trig gains you standings with Edencom, because when you lose standings with Edencom, you gain standings with Trig and vice versa. In this case, you're shooting at drifters, so you should lose standing with drifters and gain standings with Edencom and the Trig. But we'll see. All right, NPCs will now utilize micro-warp drives to close distances. NPCs will move more slowly within their optimal orbit range. This is the sites that were originally put in adjacent to Zarzak, but then now has been put into Pochvin. Inertia modifiers and mass values have been adjusted to make NPCs more agile. Optimal range weapon ranges have been increased for fall-off ranges have been added. Weapon tracking has been improved significantly. Shield and armor resistances have been reduced. Signature radius for frigates, destroyers, and cruisers have been increased. Signature radius for battleships have been decreased. So it looks like they're going to be faster, but a little bit easier to hit, a little bit bigger, and hitting a little bit harder. Drifter officers within Vigilant Point sites must now be destroyed before the next wave spawns to increase the destroyed Drifter Commander counter. Vigilant Point site beacons will now appear within their lobby instead of the combat area. Vigilant Point sites beacons will now persist after the site is completed. Vigilant Point acceleration gates will now be accessible without a key after the site has been completed. So what was happening was people would run the Vigilant Point sites, and then they were able to sit in there basically safely for that point on, because the beacon would despawn. I just checked my standing history, so for each side, there's a derived standing, which boosts both Trig and Edencom standing, but there's another side completion standing boost for the Trig side that decreases Edencom standings. That sucks. Okay, so it's like countered. Interesting. Okay. So yeah, just doing the rogue drone and the incipit drone swarms, or incipit, whatever, the Torpor, Sleeper Hive, and Incipit Drone Swarms are going to be still the best places besides like roaming packs. The site completion is lower though, but yeah, it's going to be a counter force. Interesting. So a common solution to the site has been kiting NPCs and largely ignoring them, which goes against the intended gameplay loops. As such, outrunning these NPCs have been made much more difficult. NPCs will now be more of a threat, but also easier to destroy. The change to when the Drifter officers must be destroyed aims to increase the challenge when attempting to draw Strategos. This also prevents Electo's Blind Fury being used as a tool to help clear multiple waves. The beacon and acceleration gate behavior has been made consistent with the Observatory Flashpoint site. This prevents them from being used as safe locations following the site's completion. And then the Overmind Nursery Groves have been partially rebalanced. This is the exploration site. Replace the Triglavian survey databases found within salvaging to Overmind Nursery nests with Triglavian salvaged materials. This was like, so a month or two ago, they made this change that made it so there's Triglavian survey databases, so you could just turn them in directly there in Pochvin, which was really easy and seemed extremely straightforward and kind of problematic to me, but like I was more than willing to use that function. But at the same time, Trig salvage has been a big issue, especially after the Babaraga was introduced. So there's been a lot of stuff with farming Trig stuff for salvage and whatnot. And the point of the matter is that the funnel for salvage, or the faucet for salvage, has just been lower than it was back when invasions were out. So they're adding Triglavian salvage into the nursery groves as a new method of getting salvage, which is fine. I actually really like this change. I don't think that makes as much sense for Triglavian survey databases. You just immediately turn in at the structure, the stations that are there. This makes it back to being like you go and you do your exploration and then you pull it out and then turn it in somewhere, right? So this is good just overall. Reduce the number of sites to 9 from 10, and a beacon will now spawn in the site's lobby when the site completes. Again, just to make sure that people can't just use it as a safe spot. Replacing the red loot with Triglavian salvage gives a way to acquire these materials without damage to Triglavian standings. Big. I love it, because people wanted to be able to build Triglavian ships, like T2 Triglavian ships, but you can't without killing Triglavians. So this actually gives you an outlet to get Triglavian salvage without killing Triglavians, which I really appreciate. The average value for the site has increased fairly significantly with this change, although that could theoretically change as time, like as the availability of salvage goes down, the value of it could go down, but whatever. Resulting in a small tweak to the number of sites available. Also, the number is now divisible by 3, which is great. Like with the Vigilant Point sites, this beacon has been added to prevent the site from being a safe haven once the site has ended. The funny part is that by changing the survey databases to salvage means that you need a hauler. Well, a lot of exploration ships have pretty decent cargo bays, but yeah, maybe. You'll have to pull stuff out more often, that's true. Science and industry. Increase Metanox's daily consumption from 3,600 to 4,800. So it goes from 150 hourly to 200. And decreases the magmatic gas volume from 0.1 to 0.01. So now magmatic gas is easier to move around. That also includes for people that are raiding skyhooks. But it also means that there's a higher demand for magmatic gas overall in value. It also means that Metanoxes are going to be more expensive to run. And every time they do that, like, more people are going to shift either away from using Metanoxes or at least mining it themselves using a standard Athanor or whatever, right? We are actively... You saw one can drop 1,000 M3. That's not going to work in the long run, right? But if you're just doing them for standings, isn't it best to take out one NPC and move to the next system anyways? It depends. I mean, if you can kill one really nice NPC, then move on to the next system anyways. Yes. Then isn't it kind of impossible? Which is crazy, because like there's a lot of traveling in those two sites. It's definitely designed to be done with like a frigate or whatever. So that's not good. The 1,000 M3 in a single hacking can is terrible. That's weird. All right. We are actively working towards a long-term solution for the Metanoxes and its impact. These changes are meant to be short-term iterations to nudge the Metanox in the right direction, while we take the time we need to fix a better long-term solution. Sovereignty. It is now possible to configure skyhooks while activating, and it is now possible to configure skyhooks remotely through the My Orbital Skyhooks page. Whoop-de-doo. Wormholes. Okay, this is actually an interesting piece. Wandering K-space wormhole connections have been added to C4 wormhole systems. S047 will connect to high-sec systems. N290 will connect to low-sec systems. K329 will connect to null-sec systems. Each of these new wormholes will be battleship-sized. These wormholes will be significantly rarer than those found in C5 and C6 systems. So what's weird about this is that, like, so C4s, it's the C4 highway, right? I'm pretty sure C4 is the C4 highway. So C4s are kind of known for being kind of the bridge wormhole between deeper wormhole space and shallower wormhole space, as it were, right? With the truth is that a lot of C4s have statics and connections to other C4 systems. So once you get into a C4, it's easier to find more C4s. That's why it's called the C4 highway, right? So this is also going to make it so that that C4 world also now has an increased number of connections to high-sec, low-sec, and null-sec that spawn that are battleship size. This is going to have... There's a lot of people that live in C4s that then go and attack or do content in C5s and C6s. These are going to make those people significantly more vulnerable to being evicted or attacked or, you know, found in various different ways. And then Z142 and C248. C142 is goes C5, C6, and leads to nullsec, and C248 is a class 6 that leads to nullsec. So what's interesting about this is that back in 2020, 2021, there was a pretty controversial at the time change that was made because of CSM being highly nullsec focused, that were complaining about the number of wormhole connections to nullsec. This is also like part of a larger conversation, including filaments and other stuff like that, and blackout and all those sorts of things. So they significantly reduced the number of wormhole connections that led to nullsec. So here we now have a new type of connection to nullsec, and these wormholes are now going to spawn more frequently. So they're upping the number of connections to nullsec from C4, C5, and C6 wormholes. That also makes it easier for nullsec to find C4, C5, and C6 wormholes, which of course doesn't help them very much because it isn't going to be useful. Like C4s maybe, but C5s and C6s often don't lead to HiSec or to known space. So like using it as a highway to get to somewhere like HiSec isn't really going to be that effective. You could theoretically run the sites there, but like nullsec usually have their own things to do. This mostly just makes nullsec a little bit more vulnerable to wormholes and doesn't give them something necessarily for them to capitalize on as much. Explorers aren't necessarily going to want to go in there because C4s, C5s, and C6s don't have the nullsec exploration sites. So they're just more likely to, or they're better off just staying in nullsec. Scan levels for certain wormholes have been changed. Wandering wormholes, these have all been changed from 1 to 2. These have been changed from 2 to 1. These have been changed from 3 to 2. These have been changed from 2. A lot of little changes. Not sure exactly where that's going to go. Or like, just, it's going to make it... This affects people that scan things down and actually look at the levels to try to guess what type of wormholes they are, or what kind of sites they are, and which ones are easier to scan down versus others. And then this is the J492. That's that wormhole that we were always waiting for. And I think that this is the one to Nundin, right? Tabitzer. Sorry, Tabitzer. 1 billion medium hold to low sec, but does it always end up... It was added with Tabitzer, but do we know if it always exits in Tabitzer? Okay. It's a wormhole that originates in W space and has an exit in Tabitzer, and everybody's saying that that's correct. So yes, there are now new wormhole connections that explicitly connect to Tabitzer. So in the same way that Turner has a bunch of connections at any given time to low-sec, Tabitzer has a bunch of wormhole connections to wormhole space. Tabitzer being the system that was like the big drifter crisis with the deathless people that were there, and like the Mimitar attacked and all that sort of stuff. That was Tabitzer. So now that system is special, probably forever in that way. The goal for these newish C6 wormholes and increased frequencies is to give residents across to more content opportunities. In addition, these C4s may occasionally luck into direct high-sec connection. Scan levels have been tweaked for both consistency and usability. Any wormhole that can appear in both a static and wandering will now use a different scan level, so they are more easily distinguishable. Ah, I see. So that way you know whether or not something's your static or your wandering before you finish scanning it down, or just by looking at it. All right. Information windows for wormholes have been updated. This is actually really good. I was afraid that they were going to put information into wormholes that like weren't already there, or you could only get by looking at it. Didn't look like they did that. They just made it a lot clearer, the information that was there. So the information for a wormhole's destination, maximum ship size, lifetime, and mass stability has been simplified. Lifetime and mass stability messages now include a color for improved readability. A 1 hour remaining lifetime message has been added. A drifter wormhole designation message has been added, and a C13 wormhole destination message has been added. So now when you look at a wormhole, it tells you much simpler, like in more Englishy terms, instead of saying like it has not been highly disrupted. It is, you know, going to last for more than 20. They have a lot more information, or it's a lot clearer to somebody just looking at it to know which one that they're going to. In fact, it'll say, like, it'll say, I think it says C1 to 3, C3, C4. Like it actually just literally tells you exactly what kind of place it is. And the 1 hour remaining is definitely neat. That's true. Yeah, you no longer have to decode them. And you can just read them. The warp in and spawn points with C2 cosmic anomaly sites have been adjusted. The targeting prioritization for capital escalation site drifter NPCs are now much more varied. The loot value drop from upgraded Avenger NPCs have been increased from 50 from 35, and deep flow rift sites no longer spawn within wormholes. Deep flow rifts are the fishing sites. But I love solving riddles. Well, there's definitely still riddles out there. It's just what the stability of the wormhole means is not one of them anymore as much. There's still things like shrinks. There's still things like wobbles and stuff that'll help you. Like a knowledgeable person will be able to get more information out of it. Many of the spawn points found in C2's cosmic anomaly sites were extremely far apart. This resulted in a lot of time with the site dedicated to just moving between locations, having the spawns closer together, making running these sites more enjoyable and rewarding. Capital escalation site drifters often focus logistics ships when present, making it easier for higher value ships to avoid danger. These NPCs are now much more likely to vary the kind of ships that they target. Upgraded Avenger NPCs will now only appear and remain within a capital escalation site that has been escalated. Increasing the rewards earned by defeating these NPCs further encourages the use of capitals for this content, creating more juicy targets from outer space. Fixing wormhole space, especially capital escalation, is like just a constant thing. Deep flow rifts have been generally been considered out of place within wormhole ecosystem, and as such has been removed. Already existing sites will remain, but will not respawn once completed. Again, that's like the high sec, or like that's the fishing sites. Okay. Gameplay. Rogue walls, facts, and jump freighters will now be blocked from sites which disallow other capital ships from entering. That's kind of funny. The retriever is now shown in the astrogeology skill is required for at level 3, like the other 2 mining barges. Fixed a Sancha NPC showing up as the Serpentis variation in the Violent Expulsion level 1 mission. Fix Angel Sentry Towers from being used in the Serpentis Rally Point instead of Serpentis Sentry Towers. That's good, because like every once in a while I would get a random Angel hit, and I'd be like, what the hell? And I think that's probably why. Fix the typos, fix typos. Fix a rare issue with a second Galente Dreadnought could appear within an observatory flashpoint site. That's spooky. NPCs within observatory flashpoints or smaller scale sites will now correctly orbit within their EWAR effective ranges. Good. A lot of times, actually, the most common of these was like, and this actually might make things more dangerous, because like a lot of the ships that point you or scram you in Edencom will often try to orbit outside of its scram range. So they'll scram you, but then they'll drop their scram and allow you to get off. This will probably make it so that's not a lot less possible. Drifter and sleeper NPCs with remote repair effects can now repair their allies. That's going to make them all a lot harder. Yep, and that's it for the major update. Like I said, mostly just a balance pass, but a pretty significant one, but definitely not like the savior that the Revenant major updates were. And then on the 11th, we have roaming NPCs will now only warp to the following sites: Observatory Flashpoints, Vigilant Points, World Arc Proving Grounds, Accelerator Flashpoints, Stellar Fleet Deployment Sites, and Stellar Observatory Points. Roaming NPCs will no longer warp to destructible effect beacons. Roaming NPCs will weigh warping to sites more consistently. Previously, some fleets were able to enter certain sites and alter the intended balance of that site. Now the NPCs will only go to sites that feature a lobby area. In addition, roamers will now more evenly split their attention between sites and other locations. Note that this change will apply to all Triglavian invasion roamers, including the spawns in Pochfin, Minor Victory Systems, Edencom Fortress Systems, and NPC spawns from Pochfin wormholes. I think that this sucks because I actually really love the idea that roaming NPCs cause occasional spikes in difficulty within sites, but whatever. More consistent sites are fine, I guess. Added icons to the market tooltips for your orders and orders that are in your route. Skyhooks can be warped to again from the My Orbital Skyhook window, and roaming NPCs will no longer warp to the small-scale sites within Pochfin. Cool. And then 12th, fix the Harada Oki Atavum transport item trader and rare wormholes Harada Oki bivouac site, having some trade offers for infomorph decryption keys instead of Atavums. That's not a big deal. All right, and that's it for patch notes for the major update. And since then, you know, there is, like I said, there's still a lot of things that we were supposed to have gotten, especially Gold Rush, that we didn't get. But that leads me to Operation Nemesis FAQ. So starting tomorrow is the Vanguard shooter test. It's going to last for 2 weeks, and this one is going to be very interesting. And I would argue, I think that this is the first step towards actually like what they meant by Gold Rush. So when they talked about Gold Rush, they talked about the idea that like occasionally something will happen in a specific system that makes it more valuable. Like a comet will come in, or some other thing will happen that makes it so that it's very lucrative to go there. And this was also as part of like the map update, right? People using the map more in order to navigate around and find content. That is, in essence, what Gold Rush is supposed to be. So let's, with that in mind, look at the Operation Nemesis FAQ for the Vanguard test. When will it run? This event will run from 16th of September to the 2nd of October, 11 UTC, for both EVE Online and EVE Vanguard. What is it about? Operation Nemesis is a world event playable in both EVE Online and EVE Vanguard. In EVE Vanguard, you're a war clone mercenary recruited by the factions of New Eden and the secretive Deathless Circle to uncover advanced technology. But standing in your way is Morta's Legion, a formidable force determined to stop you. Your mission? Disable Upwell defenses, push back Morta's Legion, and recover valuable secrets hidden across the combat zone. These secrets will reveal the location of high-value convoys traveling through space. Capsuleers in EVE Online respond by intercepting and looting these convoys to recover additional intel. Complete expeditions for the factions of New Eden, uncover intel, and fuel the war machine. 2 separate games, 1 joint operation. Your actions on the ground of EVE Vanguard will leave a lasting impact of EVE Online. This I actually really, really like. The idea of like the connection between EVE Online, the connection between EVE Online and the shooter has always been one that's like very exciting, but it's hard to get right, right? I've talked about this before, where the connections between faction warfare and stuff back in the day with Dust was very, not only not great, but literally like we used it to the opposite effect. It led to the opposite behaviors that you would like people to have when it comes to that kind of effect. And then, you know, the Vanguard has had impact on insurgencies and stuff, but overall that has been relatively mild, barely noticeable, more of a tech demo than anything. This is great. I love the idea of the shooter, the connection between the shooter and the space game is specifically spawning mechanics, right? So now, as people complete tasks in Vanguard, convoys will appear in New Eden that must then be hunted down, okay? So that is a direct connection between these two games. As you complete expedition assignments in EVE Vanguard, you can contribute global points towards the progress gauge that is shared by the global community of war clones. Each time the progress gauge fills, a new raidable convoy will appear in a different area of space in EVE Online, including high-sec, low-sec, and null-sec. Capsuleers can then scan or probe these convoys to intercept them and steal their loot. The loot in question consists of sealed project crates, which can then be traded to Deathless Wraith traders to unlock rewards. This is also going to have things like Plex, cosmetics, and other big things in this sort of stuff. I want the option to fight for Morta's Legion. I agree, and I understand that, and I think that, like, that, so in the end, when, like, next year, when we get bastions and stuff, we're going to be able to fight on all different kinds of sides of the fight. This is a sample of that. This is just one lens of that. Instead of multiple bastions, there's just kind of one bastion, this idea, and it'll expand outward from there. But, you know, for the purposes of this scenario, there's only the one option, which is to fight against Upwell. Now, admittedly, you could always work on it in-game and try to defend the convoys or collect the stuff and not deliver them to the Deathless if you want to. But yeah, either way, the point here is that I think that this is one of the very first pieces of Gold Rush, right? Because people are going to need to find these convoys in space once you're fighting for the empires as well. That's true, but you're fighting against Mortis Legion through the Deathless, right? Yeah, recruited by the factions of New Eden and the secret. Yeah. So, yeah, as long as you're willing to work against the Mortis Legion and Upwell. To learn more about the link between these two games, now in the future, please check out our recent dev chat, including CSP Kami and CSP Collins. What reward can I earn for playing Operation Nemesis? Your actions in both EVE Online and EVE Vanguard will advance you a personal reward track with milestones for unlocking Skinner components, skins, sealed project crates, and more. So this goes back to kind of what we saw in Hobo Leaks a few days ago? A few weeks ago? We did get some new Skinner patterns, which look really pretty, but also... Really? Huh. Well, here we go. Incursus the Arcambine Horizon skins for the Incursus, Vexer, Ishkur, Enyo, Ishtar, Hurricane, Stabber, Sleipnir, Vagabond, Bellicose, Hugin, Rapier, and Gila. Although all of these look like droppable skins, potentially. Like, they don't say they auto-apply, so it's hard to tell. But then in addition to that, we have these different patterns that you can choose, that we can get. And new colors. So we could check those out at some point, but I'm probably going to check these out tomorrow when we know a better idea of what it is that we're looking at, like how easy and hard these things are to get. So then we have the Zealot Arcambine Arisen and the Omen Arcambine Arisen, and then we have the this is the Squall that we kill. These are the sealed projects that we get, and this is the guy that we turn it into. This should be familiar with, yeah. So please note, playing as either a Capsuleer or a War Clone will contribute towards your personal reward track, but rewards and progress will only be available in EVE Online for this operation. It's really interesting because, like, normally your track is only on a character, so you could actually theoretically do the track on multiple characters, but like your progress in Vanguard is not on a EVE Online character. In fact, it even says earlier or later, it says, is my character in EVE Vanguard the same character as EVE Online? No, they are not the same. In this operation, you'll play a Capsuleer in EVE Online or a War Clone in EVE Vanguard, where while the two roles are different, they're aligned to the same cause and contribute to the same greater conflict. When you log into EVE Vanguard, you will use your EVE Online account, but the connection is currently recognized only at the account level. We're still refining on how closely these experiences will be intertwined in the future, so stay tuned as this concept evolves, which means that the player track, your personal reward track, will also likely have to be account-wide instead of character-wide. Is this an EVE Online event or an EVE Vanguard event? It's both. Consider this a New Eden event on two fronts, whether you're attacking it from above or in the immersive sandbox or setting. Immersive sandbox setting of EVE Online or eliminating enemies in the more visceral FPS experience in EVE Vanguard. Your actions carry weight and consequences. Are the enemies in EVE Vanguard connected to what's happening in EVE Online? Yes, they are. While they are separate games, they exist within the same vast universe, a living, breathing world shaping by familiar factions, legendary characters, and most importantly, you, the intrepid Capsuleer for the Merciless War Clone. Or the Merciless War Clone. This operation is yet another chapter in the history of New Eden, where even the smallest action can have a lasting impact. And this is just the beginning. They did actually suggest that, like, the story may play out over the course of this 2 weeks. I know I've said this every single time, but they have more directly called it out this time. So we'll have to see how that works. I haven't played EVE Online before. Will I be able to participate in this event? Of course, simply download the EVE launcher and create your EVE account. Once you've created your account and installed the launcher, you should see EVE Vanguard option. Download the game and jump into the operation. So it sounds like you're not going to need to have Omega for this one either. Or Vanguard activity will advance all three character tracks. That would be weird, because then if you do a bunch of Vanguard, then you complete all three tracks at the same time. I don't know. I belong to a corporation, EVE Online. Is this event designed for corporation or alliance play? While we do encourage everyone, Capsuleers and War Clones alike, to join the conflict, this event is primary PvE. where New Eden's factions work together to take down Morta's Legion. However, you can certainly fleet up and squad with friends. Consider having someone to deploy on the ground, while another taking fight to protect the space above, and watch for convoys spawn as they're subsequently destroyed throughout your combined efforts. Yeah, but this where the spawn is going to happen is probably not related to where the fight is happening. I'm not sure. I'm a new or returning player. How can I access Operation Nemesis? You can download it from the website or by launching it from your preferred storefront after logging in and creating your free account. Yeah, it's on the client. Yes, yes, yes. Community gauge is filled, and I'm in a system where the convoy is shown in the map. However, my directional scanner... See, the convoy is shown on the map. However, my directional scanner isn't picking up the convoy. Make sure to check your filters. So yeah, on the day of, you're going to want to go into your overview settings and make sure that Vanguard entities are selected. Otherwise, they won't appear. Operation Nemesis is another step in developing the shared universe. So yeah, I'm really excited about this. There's going to be the new guns, and there's going to be these hunting down of these convoys, and the convoys sound like they're going to be really, really valuable. So yeah, we're going to check it out. You can now download Vanguard. It's 54 gigabytes. All right, well, cool. We also have the CSM coming up. We did talk about this a little bit, I think, but just to let people know, the CSM is coming together at this point. I will probably be talking about it more as we go. The CSM is incredibly important. Although I don't have anybody that I'm 100% pulling for yet right now. I think Dutch Gunner has announced that he's not running again this year. So if you are interested in running for the CSM and you want to come talk to me and show off how much you know about the game so people might vote for you, please reach out to me on Discord. No, I'm good with CSM. We've talked about that before. All right. And there is a monthly economic report, but unfortunately, like, this has gone on a long time because even though they're like the patch was fairly big, there's a lot of stuff for us to talk about, and my son did have to come home from school. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to wrap up today's stream here, and we'll talk about the monthly economic report a little bit more either tomorrow or later this week. I think that's about it for today. There wasn't any New Eden news or anything. So yeah. By the way, just as a final thing, my webcam like totally crapped out this morning. So I'm going to have to figure out how to replace my webcam. If somebody wants to help out, like, you can either hit me up in Discord or talk in the supporter channel. And no, I don't need to be on the CSM. I already can talk to CCP, and like, me being on the CSM would not be a great thing, because if I'm under NDA, then I can't speculate about things. You don't want me under NDA. I don't want to be under NDA. I already hated to be under NDA for Frontiers. So no, like, I am still valuable. Like, I can give my contribution. I can do everything I would normally do on a CSM without having to be on CSM, and I can still have my own autonomy and not have to be held under an NDA. So I'm not going to be running for CSM, but if you are, hit me up. But all that said, thank you guys for hanging out and checking out the stream. I do need to get a new webcam and stuff. I mean, I'm not going to have it done by tomorrow. I don't know what's happening right now. Things have been chaos, but it was really important to be able to do this stream for you guys today. Hit me up on the Discord if you come on to the Discord if you are interested in staying caught up with news and events. I've been Ashrothi. I've been playing this game since 2010, talking about it since 2012, and I'm here to put even the context for you, my fellow Empyreans. Thank you guys so much for coming, hanging out, and having your patience with me as we go through all of this. This has been quite a lot of information, but I hope it was useful to anybody. If it was useful to you, make sure to like the stream and share it with a friend, because that is how we get more people to be interested in the game and in knowing more about the game. A more literate player base means a more better EVE Online. I also want to give an extra special thanks to my top tier supporters, including my Immortal supporters: 745 MPSI, Arydanika the Queen, Bad Boy Smooth, Ebo Elite, Erladis, Elange, Flash Gordon, May, Malak Starfire, Malin, Mercuton, Mayak, Nephilim, LM1, Sheesh, Susurio, and Rid. Thank you guys so much for coming, and until next time, I'll see you in space.
Bring on the wrecking machine. For every city